So guys, I want to start a new series on the channel, but I want to hear your feedback and opinion first before I do anything, okay? So the series is going to be called Setup Wars Transformations. It's going to be a casual, laid-back video, no script, going over the transformation of setups before and after they were inspired by Setup Wars. Here's an example of one of my patrons who posted the original setup in the patron chat, and then what it looks like now after discovering Setup Wars. I'll be featuring about 5 or so setups per episode, and I plan to do one every month or every 2 weeks in addition to the usual Setup Wars every Monday. So if that's something you guys might be interested in watching, let me know in the comment section. I'm really curious to hear what you guys think. But yeah, with that said, it's time to sit back and relax because you know what time it is. Is your setup looking bland, like your grandmother's casserole? Well, spice it up then with a TechSource mousepad. You get a sharp and vibrant print on a very smooth surface with edge-to-edge stitching. And guess what? They're machine washable. Just toss it in a cold cycle for 10 minutes and they are good as new. Pick one up today at dealsource.tech/store or just click my link below. Kicking off the episode is a pretty cool stacked setup by Mitchell coming all the way from England. He's a transport controller by day and a gamer by night. Now the first thing that sticks out to me are those LEDs wrapping around the acoustic panels. Personally, I think that's doing a little too much and it's a bit distracting from the rest of the setup since you can see each individual diode. If you really wanted to add lighting the right way and make it look nice, I would recommend putting them in the back of each acoustic panels around the edges. This way you can get a nice underglow. To do this, you will first have to add spacing between the wall and the acoustic panels. The cheapest and most cost-effective way to do this is by going with these wooden squares from Amazon. There are a bunch of different sizes and thicknesses you can choose from, but usually you can buy a pack for less than 20 bucks. There are also a lot of different ways you can secure this to the wall and attach the acoustic panel to them, but the easiest method is by simply adding VHP tape to the back of the square and just gluing the acoustic panels right on it. But of course you can screw them in too if you like. So doing this will give you just enough space to not only hide the strips behind the acoustic panels, but you will also get a much nicer underglow since you won't be able to see the hot spots. This doesn't just work with acoustic panels, by the way. You can use this same method for really anything you want to add spacing to on your wall. Maybe even custom hexagon panels, which we see a lot of. See how much nicer this can look if it's done the right way? All right, back to the setup. So he does everything mostly on the 35-inch ultra-wide and uses the top 28-inch for watching content and multitasking. I've said this many times before, but if you want to eliminate the taskbar on your secondary monitor so it looks much cleaner, just disable it in the taskbar. You don't really need the taskbar to show up on all of your monitors, do you? Underneath that, we got the Corsair K95 Platinum paired with an M65 Elite mouse and a custom grommet to route the cables through the desk, which he also uses for charging. Normally, one would say that there is too much unused space on the desk, but I like to think it's a good thing, because if Mitchell ever decides to expand his setup, then he's got the extra space for it. But for now, he's only got some speakers, his clock, and a few figurines for decoration. For gaming, you just swap over to the Logitech G Pro X's, while the Sonys are for wireless listening. Nice work with the cable management, no complaints here, and really great work personalizing the setup while maintaining symmetry. Powering it all is a 3-year-old custom build inside the GameMax full tower case. We got the 8700K paired with an Asus Strix 1080 Ti. Can't say I'm impressed with the cable work inside here, but there is one major flaw with this build. Unfortunately, you have both of your RAM sticks in 2 consecutive slots, which means you're not taking advantage of dual channel speeds. Please move your first RAM stick 1 slot over to the left to take advantage of dual channel. I also have a good feeling that you didn't enable XMP profile to take advantage of the extra speeds, so make sure to do that in the BIOS. If you don't know what the hell I'm talking about, then watch this build guide and skip over to the XMP section of the video, which I will link below. You might also benefit from neutralizing the air pressure in your case by simply flipping the top fan so it's exhaust instead of intake. Aside from the questionable decisions made with the PC build and the LED strips, I think this is a pretty cool setup with room to improve. Thank you, Mitchell, for starting out the show. I think one of the more difficult setups to make are corner setups because it presents itself with challenges right off the bat, like cable management and symmetry, just to name a few. However, I think Nigel's approach to this corner setup is done well. He's a full-time employee from the Philippines who wanted to build a setup for gaming and a bit of work. So this was Nigel's setup back in July of 2020, before he stumbled across Setup Wars. Fast forward a year and a half later, and we are greeted by this. The desk was custom made by him, but it's not that deep. So to offset that, he decided to mount both monitors against the wall, which allowed him to use the extra space on the desk for other things. He was able to fit his Gundam Edition ROG Strix Scope keyboard and a G305 mouse comfortably while maintaining a healthy distance from the monitor. For general listening, we got the fancy Edifier MP260 speakers, which doubles as a clock and complements the wooden accents of the desk nicely, but for gaming it does swap between the Logitech G335s and the Corsair HS70 Pro headset. I do appreciate the effort in personalizing the setup by putting your Gundam figurines on the wall shelves, but I think it's a bit overdone. I think 3 shelves up top would have been perfect. I would also remove the LED strip from underneath the shelf and put it behind the monitors instead so the lights bounce off the wall. As I said earlier, cable management is pretty difficult on a corner desk, but the fact that I was able to manage most of the wires is still impressive. Despite the challenges, there are some benefits of going with a corner desk, like more surface area. Most of the time, the second area is used for the PC. This frees up extra space on the main area to fit multiple monitors, speakers, and other gear comfortably. Across from the main setup is a little entertainment area where Nigel games on his PS5 from his bed. Now this is a pretty cool idea if you're looking to spice up your console setup or TV entertainment area. You can do what Nigel did. He double stacked 3D wall panels. If you look closely, you can see he added a base layer of white brick panels, and then he added a second layer of art 3D panels behind the TV. You can obviously mix and match and come up with your very own design, but I think this is such a clever way of transforming the look of any setup on a tight budget. I definitely picked up some new tips and tricks so far on the show. Thank you, Nigel, for sharing this with us. Keeping the momentum going, we have a pretty dope gaming room setup to showcase from Oliver. He's a store manager from Switzerland that built the setup in the span of just 4 months for gaming and streaming. He's rocking an Odyssey G5 144Hz as the main with dual 27-inch 60Hz monitors on the sides, all curved by the way, which contributes to a clean infinity display aesthetic. However, some of the gaps between each monitor kind of ruin it if I'm being honest. The setup's color scheme seems to be mostly white with some black accents. However, it looks to be a bit unbalanced. What I mean by this is that there are areas where there is too much of one color. This is after all a white on black setup, so the colors need to flow more naturally between each gear. I love that he went with all white peripherals, but I feel like the mousepad should have been black to add a little bit of contrast and keep the white on black color scheme more consistent. Or better yet, even skinning the front facing drawers on the Alex units in black to add that subtle contrast would have been nice. We need to break apart the areas where there is a lot of white. If I'm being honest, I feel like Oliver wanted to go with an all white setup. It's pretty obvious looking at the gear. The problem is they don't make Elgato panels in white. The original PS4 Pro doesn't come in white, and he probably doesn't know how to paint his boom arm as well. So naturally, he kept those in a default color. But here's my advice if you're watching, Oliver. You don't have to settle. You can make the changes yourself to get that color scheme you want. Instead of buying a white version of the PS4 Pro, you can just skin it. D-Brand has the best skins in the market to completely change the look of your console, or you can find cheaper alternatives on Amazon. You can also skin the bottom bezels of all 3 of your monitors in white. This is the vinyl I personally use for my monitors, and I'll drop a link below if you guys want to grab it. Some other areas where you can improve on your setup is the cable management, mostly above the surface since everything underneath the desk looks good. Instead of running the mousepad cable diagonally, you can tuck it underneath the mousepad and out with the other cable you have there. The cable will most likely be short, but that's what extensions are for. In some other pictures, you have the PS4 cable doing the same thing for some reason, but honestly, I would just route it towards the back of the desk. And finally, I would replace the tripod for your ring light with a magic arm. This will allow you to clamp the ring light to your monitor mount in the back, freeing up extra space from the desk. By the way, this arm can be used for anything with a 1/4 inch or 3/8 of an inch thread. So cameras, ring lights, webcams, it really does add a ton of functionality to any setup. I'll drop a link below for anyone interested in picking one up. Finishing up, we got the PC powering it all, nicely tucked away in the corner, which is a good spot since you aren't blocking off the beautiful view and the cables are also hidden naturally. We got the Ryzen 5 5600X and the Gigabyte RTX 3070 Vision. Such a beautiful all-white build, which will complement the all-white setup a lot better, assuming you go with the changes I recommended. Coming in at number 4 is Roberto, who's a high school student from Croatia. He has been trying to get on Setup Wars for 2 years now with no luck, and for good reason. This was the original setup. And then he tried again a year later with an upgraded setup and got denied once again. He said his determination to get on the show was what kept inspiring him to improve his setup, and well, 2 years later, this is what we have. Congrats on finally making it on the show, Roberto. Another good example that perseverance pays off. Roberto built the setup in his attic so that he can escape from everything else downstairs and focus on his schoolwork, a little bit of video editing, and kicking back, relaxing, playing games. We have a lemon tabletop with a lac shelf being used as a place to store and organize some of his gear. Speaking of organizing, I do want to point out the clever desktop icon placement. I feel like it's better to organize the icons in a way that's not distracting, for those who don't keep a clean desktop, that is. It looks like he opted for wireless peripherals to keep the surface free of cables. We got the Chemove Snowfox 61 keyboard paired with a Rocat Cane 202 mouse. Very clean. Moving on to audio, there doesn't seem to be any speakers for the setup. Instead, he relies on the Logitech G733 for all of his audio needs. I like the fact that he skinned his microphone and painted his boom arm and windscreen so it blends in with the rest of the colors. Excellent work with the cable management and a pretty smart idea attaching your toolkit underneath the desk next to your audio interface and USB hub. I've actually never seen this before. Since Roberto owns both a Switch and a Wii, he installed an HDMI switcher underneath the desk so that he could easily swap between both of the consoles. But he does game mostly on his custom PC featuring the Ryzen 5 3600 and an RTX 3070 from Gainward. Despite the setup sticking to mostly neutral colors, I think the splash of colors from the wallpaper fit in nicely. I'm glad you didn't give up coming on the show, Robert. Thanks again for sharing this with us. You know, we haven't seen a setup from the United Arab Emirates in a while. I think the last one featured was in season 4. So this is Saeed's awesome man cave from Dubai, and it took him 2 years to save up and build for gaming, movies, and watching football. Man, you guys really love your RGB, don't you? He built a setup on an IKEA countertop with a few Alex units, but what's interesting is that he added the Capita legs on the bottom to lift the setup off the ground for some reason. I'm actually against doing this for 2 reasons. 1, because of the dust and dirt buildup underneath the desk, and 2, it just doesn't look as good. If we really wanted to increase the height of the desk, I would add those in between the tabletop and the Alex units. Up top, we have a 27-inch curved 144Hz monitor as the main and a secondary 27-inch and vertical with spacing between for the speakers. But for gaming, he does swap over to the Astro A50s. For peripherals, he's rocking a Logitech G915 keyboard and a G502 mouse. So mostly wireless to avoid cables, and avoiding cables he does really well. Everything underneath the desk is managed nicely. I did mention this in the last setup. I would advise against putting a tripod on the desk. Go with a camera desk mount instead. This clamps to the back of your desk and you can hook up your camera and light box without taking up extra space. He does have a pretty sweet gaming PC inside the O11 Mini, but when he gets bored at the setup, he moves on over to the entertainment area where he kicks back to watch some shows and games on his pretty sweet custom modded PS5. I mean, look at this thing, it's pretty sick. I also love how his coffee table is fully stocked with drinks and snacks. My guy sure knows how to entertain and keep his guests happy. Such a badass man cave to wrap up the episode. Thank you, Saeed, for sharing this with us. And that will do it for today's video. As always, make sure you guys comment below. Let me know which of these setups was your absolute favorite. If you guys are enjoying season 5 and also sad that it's ending really soon, let me know by tossing a like before you head out. If you guys are new here, consider subscribing because I do host Setup Wars every single Monday. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you very soon in the next one.